To extend a high poly scanned or sculpted trunk segment in Natsura, we're first going to import the high poly using the Import High Poly tool. The Import High Poly tool works a little bit like a wizard, guiding you through the setup process to prepare your scan to be extended. First, we need to select the mesh that we wish to extend. In my case, I'm going to use the example content that we ship with Natsura, and then once we've picked a file, you'll see it will load in the viewport, and we can press the Natsura logo to launch the wizard. Once we launch the wizard, it will give us some tooltips about how to proceed, but I'm just going to click Enter State for now. Whilst in this viewport, our navigation controls are slightly different to regular Houdini. We need to hold Alt on the keyboard, and then we can use the mouse to navigate around as usual. The first step is to pick a color texture that goes with this scan. So once again, I'm going to go to the example content, this time navigating to textures, and I'm going to pick the color texture that goes along with this scan. Once that's selected, we'll see the color applied to the points, and we can press Enter to proceed to the next step. This tree already came in at the correct scale, at least I think it did, but it might be that your tree came in 100 times too large. In that case, you'll need to frame the object using this button, and then once you've applied the correct scale factor, you can frame it again. Once happy with the scale and the rotation, press Enter to proceed to the next step, which is a refinement step where we can select the points from the model that we wish to keep. It's easier to make clean selections here if we're in an orthographic view, so I've switched to the front orthographic view by pressing this camera. Alternatively, we can go to the top right of the viewport and set the view from up here. Once in this view, I'm just going to left click and drag a box selection around most of the scan, leaving a small border near the top, and I'm going to press Enter. Now that I've pressed Enter, I've switched to another selection mode. This time, we need to select the regions of the scan that we wish to extend. Unlike the point selection, this will actually be easier if I'm in the perspective mode, so I can press the camera icon a couple more times to navigate to a perspective view, and then I'm just going to select this ring at the top of the mesh and hit Enter. Now the wizard has completed the setup, and we've got a scan that's ready to go and be extended and used in the rest of the tools. Once you reach this point, if you'd like to go back and modify any of the steps, feel free to modify the parameters directly, or if you find it easier, you can go straight back to the start and begin the setup wizard once more, or flick through each individual stage using these arrow buttons. After importing and configuring our high poly, the next step is to do some retopology and optional UV steps on this geometry to make it suitable for extension. We can do this by using the Graft mesh node that ships with Natsura, and we'll plug the two outputs of the import high poly into the create graft mesh. By default, the create graft mesh node will retopologize and re-UV our scanned input. And you can see that we have a visual aid showing us where the tiling textures will get blended into the unique texture of the scan near the top. Optionally, you can choose to use the existing mesh if it's already been cleaned up outside of Houdini. There are lots of options on the Create Graft Mesh node that allow you to change the UVs in the geometry that is being created. But for now, let's just see what we get by default when we place down the Natsura Bake node and wire in the left and the right pins. Once we've set the display to the Bake node, we can go up and press Bake All, and this is going to bake the high poly down to the low poly that was created by the Create Graft Mesh, including the unique texture for the base of the tree and the tiling texture at the top of the tree. This trunk is now ready to be used as an extension, and we'll come back and refine its appearance later. After baking, these files were output to disk, the baked geometry and textures, and these are now reusable modular pieces that can be loaded into other hips to be extended when needed. While working in the same hip where this trunk was baked, we can extend it directly. Firstly, let's put down a Natsura Simulate node, and then wire in a grow. By default, the grow uses its own internal decoration to do the meshing, and we want to replace that internal decoration with a specialized trunk decoration. So let's right-click and search for trunk decoration, and then we pipe the left output of the bake into the trunk decoration, and then drag and drop the trunk decoration over the internal decoration to replace it. we'll now see that we're using this trunk section in place of this grow geometry. The next step is to place a new grow attached to the top of this grow, and without having to do any additional work, we can now see that we get this extension. To make this look a little bit more complete, I'm going to go to the grow 2 and increase the recursion counter, and we'll see that we now get a seamless blend between the tiling base, the tiling modular section, and the scanned unique base. To finish up this extension, we now need to deal with assigning the textures and materials to this model. In order to assign materials to the tiling section, we need to put down a surface decoration, which is another one of the preset decorations that we ship with Natsura. On the new grow, the grow 2, which is extending the scan, we're going to drag and drop this surface decoration to replace the internal decoration, and by default we won't see much difference. The main thing this gives us is a bunch of controls on the surface decoration that affect the quality of the mesh that's being created. Another thing this enables is to create a surface resource, which is one of the ways that we keep track of materials inside of Natsura. We can plug the surface resource into the surface decoration, and you're going to see that it's using a sort of preset example texture that we've already provided with the tools. I'm also going to turn on use displacement and go and find the accompanying tiling texture for the displacement that goes with this color texture. To make it a little bit more obvious, we can go to the surface decoration, and then we can go to the surface mesh and increase the level of detail. Okay, so we've dealt with applying the texture to the procedural tiling portion of the geometry, and now we need to look at applying it to the unique texture blend region as well. To do this, we're going to go back to the Create Graft Mesh node, and you'll see that we have two options for the textures. One is to plug in the textures directly, and the second option is to use an existing resource. I'm going to click on the resource option, and then I'm going to go and drag and drop the surface resource, not the decoration, onto this black box here. We won't see any immediate updates, and that's because we now need to go back to the Bake node and hit Bake All. With this done, we now have a seamless texture blend between the tiling region and the unique texture region. The tools remain responsive, and we can model our tree interactively while preserving this extension. And if we want to, we can go back to the Create Graft Mesh node and increase the size of the blend region. Go to the Bake once more and hit Bake All again, and get a smoother transition from our tiling texture to the unique texture at the base. If we go back to the surface resource, we can control the strength of the displacement and see that it's seamless between the unique base and the tiling portion of the tree.